Mikayla Nogueira just posted a video telling the world she's lost herself.
Last 6 years, I have been completely immersed in influencer culture.
She said she's lost who she is, that the influencer life has swallowed her whole, and that things are finally going to change. And for about 30 seconds, I actually believed her. Then she posted a sponsored ad the very next day. So today, we need to talk about what's really going on with Mikayla, whether this is a genuine wake-up call or just the latest chapter in a long pattern of saying the right things and doing the exact opposite. Because we've watched this unfold over years at this point, and I think it's time to lay the whole thing out from the beginning. The rise, the turn, the scandals, the money era, and where she actually stands right now. This one is going to be a full breakdown. Let's start at the beginning, because I think that context matters more than people give it credit for. When Mikayla first started building her audience on TikTok, there was genuinely something different about her. She wasn't the polished, perfectly lit LA girl telling you to buy a $90 serum. She was just a girl from Massachusetts who loved makeup. She was buying drugstore products, giving real opinions, and sometimes those opinions were not nice. She would tell you straight up if something was garbage. People felt like they had finally found someone who was one of them, someone who got excited about a $7 lip liner the same way they did, someone who wasn't performing relatability, but actually living it. And her audience grew because of that. Because she was relatable in a way that a lot of beauty influencers at the time simply were not. There was also the personality. She was funny. She was loud in an endearing way. The accent, which, yes, became a whole conversation later, was part of what made her feel real. She wasn't filing down her edges to appeal to a broader audience. She was just herself. And in a space that was already getting pretty oversaturated with girls who all felt like slightly different versions of the same person, that stood out. And for a while, she held on to that. There was a real period where she seemed genuinely grateful for what she'd built. You could feel it in the way she talked to her audience, the way she responded to comments, the way she reacted when something she recommended sold out. The audience could feel it too. That's a big part of why people became so loyal to her so quickly. They weren't just following a beauty account, they felt like they were rooting for someone. Then came Lashgate. If you're not familiar, Lashgate was the moment where a lot of people started to question whether Mikayla was actually being straight with them. I'm not going to go through every detail of it right now because that's its own video. But the short version is that it raised serious questions about authenticity, about whether what people were seeing from her was real, and about whether she would take accountability when something went wrong. And I think it's the moment that, looking back now, really set the course for everything that followed. Because here's the thing about Lashgate. It wasn't just a controversy. It was a fork in the road. She could have come out, owned the mistake completely, apologized sincerely, and done the actual work of rebuilding trust with her audience. That path is hard. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to sit in a really awkward place for a while. But it works, and people respect it, because they can see someone choosing honesty over self-protection. The other option was to brush past it, deflect, make light of it, and lean into the idea that the hate was unwarranted or overblown. And once you go down that second road, it becomes very hard to reverse course. Because every time something new comes up, you've already established a pattern of not fully owning your mistakes. And audiences have long memories, even when they seem like they've moved on. Lashgate and the 519 situation were the first real cracks in the foundation. But they weren't the last, and they were just the beginning of a much bigger shift in how she was. Over the next couple of years, the content started to change in ways that were difficult to ignore. The non-stop sponsored posts, the overlapping brand deals where she'd spend weeks telling you a product changed her skin and then pivot to a completely different product making the exact same claims. She credited her skin to one serum, then 2 weeks later credited it to a different serum she was suddenly being paid to promote, and then another one after that. You can't do that over and over again and expect people not to notice, especially when your whole identity is built on being the person who tells you the truth about what actually works. The disclosures, or the lack of them, made it worse. A lot of her audience had no idea which videos were paid for because she wasn't making that clear unless a brand contractually required her to include the disclosure. When you have millions of people who genuinely trust your recommendations, and a significant portion of those recommendations are actually undisclosed sponsorships, that is not a small problem. That's a fundamental betrayal of what the relationship between a creator and their audience is supposed to be. And Mikayla herself has said out loud that trust is the most important thing you can have with your audience. She said it herself, which makes the pattern here even harder to defend. The content started changing in other ways too. The thumbnails got more extreme. The reactions got more dramatic. There was a shift toward whatever was going to get the most engagement, the most clicks, the most shock value. Pour half a bottle of product on your face. Do the big wide-eyed reaction. Make everything feel like the most dramatic moment of all time. And look, I understand why that happens. The algorithm rewards it. Views mean money. And when this is your career and your livelihood, you do what works. But the audience that fell in love with the girl who gave you an honest opinion about a drugstore blush starts to feel the distance when every piece of content feels engineered for maximum reaction rather than genuine connection. But the thing that I think really started to turn the tide wasn't even the ads, or the disclosure issue, or the content style shift. It was the wealth. The $200,000 shopping haul was a turning point that I genuinely don't think Mikayla fully anticipated. And I want to be careful here, because I do think there's nothing inherently wrong with being successful. Nobody should have to feel guilty for making money, or for being able to afford things they couldn't afford before. It's actually one of the best parts of watching someone you've rooted for from the beginning make it. But there is a real and meaningful difference between watching someone you followed for years achieve things they never could have imagined, getting their dream home, traveling somewhere beautiful, treating themselves to something nice, and watching someone spend what most working people in this country would consider a genuinely life-altering amount of money on clothes and shoes and bags in a single afternoon, while a huge portion of those same followers are working 40 hours a week and still calculating whether they can afford dinner on Friday. We are in a specific moment right now where people's patience for that kind of content is at an all-time low. The influencer culture that once felt aspirational has started to feel extractive to a lot of people. They're watching someone get rich off their attention, their loyalty, their engagement, their purchases, and then spend it in ways that feel like a deliberate display rather than genuine enjoyment. And Mikayla walked right into the middle of that shift with a $200,000 haul and seemingly no awareness of how it would land. The timing made it worse. Around that same period, she reportedly couldn't find time to film an angel tree haul. An angel tree haul, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is one of the most basic, low-effort ways to publicly do something charitable around the holidays. The contrast between those two things was not lost on people, and it stayed in the comment section for a long time. There was also the New York situation. A few months before all of this, Mikayla mentioned she was thinking about buying a second home in New York, and the reaction from her audience was genuinely confused. People were like, "You just spent millions on a beautiful house. You're building a life. What about Cody? Why would you do that?" Most people chalked it up to business partners or industry pressure to be in a major market, which honestly would make more sense. But the fact that it was even a conversation people were having tells you something about where the audience's head was at. They were already feeling the gap between who she used to be and who she was becoming. We are in a specific moment right now where people's patience for that kind of content is at an all-time low. The influencer culture that once felt aspirational has started to feel extractive to a lot of people. They're watching someone get rich off their attention, their loyalty, their engagement, their purchases, and then spend it in ways that feel like a deliberate display rather than genuine enjoyment. And Mikayla walked right into the middle of that shift with a $200,000 haul and seemingly no awareness of how it would land. The timing made it worse. Around that same period, she reportedly couldn't find time to film an angel tree haul. An angel tree haul, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is one of the most basic, low-effort ways to publicly do something charitable around the holidays. The contrast between those two things was not lost on people, and it stayed in the comment section for a long time. There was also the New York situation. A few months before all of this, Mikayla mentioned she was thinking about buying a second home in New York, and the reaction from her audience was genuinely confused. People were like, You just spent millions on a beautiful house. You're building a life. What about Cody? Why would you do that? Most people chalked it up to business partners or industry pressure to be in a major market, which honestly would make more sense. But the fact that it was even a conversation people were having tells you something about where the audience's head was at. They were already feeling the gap between who she used to be and who she was becoming. Around this same time, Mikayla did a Get Ready With Me where she asked her audience directly what they wanted to see from her going forward. And the response was massive and extremely clear. Hundreds and hundreds of comments all essentially saying the same things. More makeup content, honest reviews of products at accessible price points, tutorials focused on technique rather than just introducing new products, wear tests instead of first impressions, and please, fewer luxury hauls. People were writing things like, "Your content constantly feels like it's throwing your wealth in our faces, while a lot of us can't even afford groceries." That feedback was not ambiguous. It was not a mixed signal. It was her audience handing her a roadmap. So after receiving all of that feedback, do you want to know what Mikayla said in her very next video? She said she felt like she couldn't show people the products she was using because her audience doesn't want her pushing products on them. The comments went completely sideways because that is not what anyone said. Not a single person said they didn't want to know what she was using. They didn't say they wanted her to stop talking about products. They said they were exhausted by being sold things through partnerships that weren't being properly disclosed, and by watching her contradict her own recommendations every few weeks because a new brand deal had arrived. Those are two very different things. One is about what she talks about. The other is about honesty and integrity. And conflating them, whether that was intentional or not, felt to a lot of people like she was either genuinely missing the point or choosing to miss it. And here's the PDRN situation, which is maybe the cleanest example of the whole problem. She spent weeks promoting various PDRN skincare products from different brands. She was being paid to do this. She told her audience these products were incredible, that they were changing her skin, and her audience bought them because they trust her word. Then, when she launched her own skincare line and her own serum, she came out and basically said that the PDRN products on the market don't actually work, that they're not effective. And her audience had one very obvious and very fair question. Did they work when you were being paid a year's salary to tell us they worked? Because they worked great then. You made sure we all knew they worked then. That is not a minor inconsistency. That is a direct, documented example of telling your audience one thing because you're being compensated to say it, and then saying the opposite the moment it's financially convenient to do so. And people have been watching this pattern repeat itself for years now. That's why the trust is where it is. I also want to spend a minute on POV, because I think it's genuinely important to this story, and it doesn't get talked about enough. When Mikayla launched POV, a lot of people, myself included, thought this was going to be the thing. This felt like her building something real, something that could carry her beyond TikTok, something that wasn't dependent on the algorithm or the sponsorship cycle, a brand she actually owned and believed in. And I still think the idea behind it was solid. It's smart to build something tangible when your career exists on platforms you don't control. But here's what happened. She launched POV and then kept doing everything exactly the same. The volume of sponsorships didn't decrease. The brand deals kept coming, overlapping, contradicting each other. POV became one more thing rather than the thing. And it put her in this weird position where she was now competing with herself in some ways, promoting other brand skincare products while simultaneously trying to build her own skincare brand. That's how you end up in the PDRN situation. That's how you end up telling your audience a product is transformative, and then 6 months later telling them it doesn't work, because now you have your own version to sell. If POV was supposed to be her legacy project, her long game, the thing that shows she understands this career has a shelf life, it needed to be treated like that from the beginning. And it hasn't been. Now, here's where I actually land on all of this, and I want to be honest about it. I genuinely believe people can change. I don't think that's naive. I think it's true. Someone can be going down the wrong road for a long time and then have a moment, a real one, where something clicks and they make a different choice. I've seen that happen with other creators who hit a similar wall and came out the other side with something more grounded and more honest. It doesn't always work, but it can. But I also think Mikayla is in a genuinely complicated position that she has to some extent built for herself. She has a lifestyle to maintain that requires a certain level of income. She is likely the primary earner in her household. She has contracts and obligations. When someone in the comments told her to take her money, invest it wisely, and just go live her life, she responded that she can't, for one very specific reason. She didn't say what that reason was. Maybe it's POV. Maybe it's financial obligations. Maybe it's something contractual. But whatever it is, it tells you something real about where she actually is versus where the speech suggested she wanted to be. The people who aren't buying this comeback moment have a legitimate point when they note that she's said versions of this before. One commenter wrote, "You say this every year." And if that is true, if this is a recurring cycle where she expresses that she's lost and things need to change, and then nothing actually changes, then the speech itself becomes part of the pattern, not a break from it. What her audience actually wants from her is not complicated. They have told her, clearly and repeatedly. They want the Mikayla who bought the $12 mascara and told you whether it was actually worth it. The one who did harsh first impressions even when the answer was that it was not good. The one who felt like she was figuring it out alongside her audience, rather than speaking to them from somewhere above. The one who, when she loved a product, you actually believed her because she had also told you other products were terrible. That version of her is not gone forever. People want to root for her. The comments every time she posts are not just hate. There are still huge numbers of people who are waiting for her to give them a reason to trust her again. They haven't fully walked away, but they're watching her actions, not her words. Whether she's willing to actually go back to that, and more importantly, whether she's capable of doing it given the financial reality and lifestyle she has built around herself, is the real question here. Because it would mean doing fewer deals. It would mean saying no to things. It would mean a potential dip in income while she rebuilds credibility. That's a real sacrifice. And it's easy to say you're willing to make it in a video, and much harder to actually do it when the next offer comes in. Trust, once it's broken enough times, doesn't come back because someone makes a heartfelt video about it. It comes back through consistent behavior over a long period of time. Months of it. Decisions that people can point to. Moments where she clearly chose integrity over a check. And right now, the behavior is still telling a different story than the words. That gap is what her audience is watching. That gap is what's going to determine whether this is the beginning of something real or just another moment that gets filed under things she said and didn't follow through on. So here's what I genuinely want to know from you. Do you think Mikayla can actually turn this around at this point? Do you think the audience that's drifted away would come back if she made real, visible changes over the next few months? Or do you feel like the damage has already been done and no amount of course correction is going to bring back the trust she had in those early days? Let me know in the comments, because this is one where I think opinions are genuinely split, and I want to hear where people are landing. And if you're new here and you want to keep up with content like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you soon!